Next on Arizona 360, seasoned lawmaker Jon Kyl on his return to the U.S. Senate.
When the stakes aren't as high, I suspect the emotions won't be as high.
Getting the next generation of voters to go to the polls.
I think students are wanting to get involved. They're just trying to find which avenues to do that.
Plus, fixing crumbling infrastructure in southern Arizona.
The public is also our eyes and ears on the road.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. Arizona has one U.S. Senate seat up for a vote and another that could open up in January. When Jon Kyl took the place of the late Senator John McCain, Kyl said he would only stay through the current congressional session, but it's not a guarantee. Christopher Conover learned as much when he sat down with Senator Kyl in Tucson. Their discussion began with how he's transitioned back into office since retiring nearly 6 years ago.
First of all, it feels great to be back in Tucson. I haven't been back here for a while, and it's good to see my old friends here and hear again some of the issues that, for some reason, the issues seem to remain the same. VA still has a problem, still have a problem down on the border, and we're still trying to protect our military installations and the like, which is all good to hear about today. Washington is a little different, but except for the Kavanaugh hearings, it's not that different. And I had spent some time back in Washington after I left the Senate as well. But the Kavanaugh hearings, after the allegations of the impropriety, really turned the place into an environment that was not fun to be in, and I'm sure it wasn't very attractive to be watched. Hopefully that will dissipate over time after the election, and people have time to relax their family and think it over and go home a while. We'll come back in January and work okay. There's also a small lame duck session in November and December to finish up some of the things that need to be done.
You mentioned the Kavanaugh hearings, saying they weren't fun, but hopefully those wounds can heal. Some of those wounds looked pretty deep.
They are. When the stakes aren't as high, I suspect the emotions won't be as high. Democrats saw big stakes here in a member going on the Supreme Court who they thought would not be the kind of judge that they wanted, and they wanted to stop him at all costs, and they tried very hard. Hopefully the issues that we'll have to face in the future won't engender that same kind of emotional hostility that you saw.
I remember doing an interview with you like this in 2007, sitting in your Senate office in Washington. The immigration deal had just fallen apart. Now, after 6 years gone, immigration's still on the table. Is there a linchpin to make immigration pass? You've been through it a couple of times.
Somehow the politics has to be taken out of it. As long as the politics are there, it's not going to get solved. We had a solution to the so-called DACA problem. I thought it was a good solution, and then there were subsequent solutions to it. But some people want a political issue rather than a solution, and as long as that's the equation, it's going to be very hard to get anything done.
You mentioned a political issue on all these things we've just talked about. Is that the new norm now? It's really a political issue, not solutions that are going on?
Obviously, politics has always been a big part of Washington, and there have been times in our history when it's been pretty nasty, as it is right now. But you'd like to get over that. You'd like to have a more civil discourse in the place that we're supposed to have that conversation, namely in the House and in the Senate and with the President. And when the lack of civility impedes the ability of the members to get together and make policy for the good of the country, you have to ask what the causes of that are and what we can do to help. You've got to be nicer, and we've got to get back to civility so that we can have a debate about the merits of the issues rather than calling each other names and just trying to throw sand in the works because we don't like the folks on the other side.
As we wrap this up, you've talked a couple times about things going on in January. When you took this position, you said you'd stay through the end of this legislative session in December. Have you made a decision to stay longer? And what will, if you haven't, what enters into your thought process as you work through that?
The answer is no, I haven't made a decision. When I make a decision, I'll talk to the governor about it first because he'll have the obligation of then appointing my successor. And I want to make sure he has plenty of time to give that the thought that he needs. I left the Senate in 2013 after having served in it for 18 years in addition to 8 years in the House. And there comes a point when you say, I've done enough. There's always more you can do. But if you follow that rule, you never leave. And I think there's a point at which people should probably leave before they have to be hauled out. Some can serve to the end of their career with great distinction. My old colleague John McCain was one. In my case, I have obligations to my family, and I think I've served my time, and it really is time to make way for someone else. And so I'll probably make that decision at some point. Governor Ducey will have the opportunity to appoint somebody to take my place. But I must say I was very honored that he selected me to serve in John's seat. And it's a real privilege to serve the people of Arizona again. As I said, I couldn't wait to get to Tucson just to revisit places and people that I've known for so long, and to do that tomorrow and in the ensuing days in other parts of the state. This is a wonderful state with great people, and it's a lot of fun to just get around and visit with them, and a real honor to be able to serve them in the United States Senate.
Thank you, Arizona. Thank you. Thank you.
In the home stretch to Election Day, candidates in closely watched races are getting a boost from some big names in politics. Just in the last week, President Donald Trump stumped for Martha McSally in Mesa, and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders traveled to Tucson to throw his support behind David Garcia. We asked political communications expert Kate Kensky about the impact these rallies can have on the polls.
Donald J. Trump.
Anytime there are high-profile politicians that come to a state, what it does for the candidates is that they're supporting is increase their exposure.
Senator Bernie Sanders.
That is important because it gets them local exposure in a variety of outlets. That's one of the reasons why people particularly appreciate presidential visits, but any high-profile politician that comes in, it helps.
Does this run the risk of backfiring and energizing the other side?
It could if the messages get out to the other side. That is a risk.
The Democrats have become an angry, unhinged mob.
This president, shamefully and uniquely in modern history, is trying to win votes by dividing us up.
It depends on how much you think things said in those events are going to leak out, and the extent to which the other side capitalizes on what's being said to stoke the anger in their base.
Midterms, as you said earlier, are hard to predict what will be the outcome. Are we seeing more or less messaging via social media, commercials, radio, and the list goes on?
It's a little bit hard to say right now. We'll have to see at the end how money has been spent. But I think that the amount of messaging has increased. But the other thing with social media is, unlike television advertising where you are broadcasting a message, social media is very particular. And so yes, increase in what people see, but mainly increase in what they want to hear.
Okay. What would you say of the tone that we've heard thus far in the midterm? Is it pretty run-of-the-mill, or has it become more, as we've heard, nasty?
I think that norms of communication have changed, and so that we are seeing the use of more terms like lies, lying, and liars across campaigns than we did in the past. It used to be the case that candidates would stay away from those particular words, in part respecting Senate norms which say, or congressional norms which say, you're not supposed to call anyone, even the other side, a liar, even when you're fairly confident they're lying about something, because that halts debate. But with social media increases and a president who's willing to use the term, we're seeing that more and more become more normative.
If Nancy Pelosi or crying Chuck Schumer and the radical Democrats take control of Congress on November 6th,
We have a president of the United States who does not believe in the reality of climate change.
Has the nastiest increased? Well, the answer is probably yes, but how we react to that has also changed.
Arizona Senate race in the spotlight for a number of reasons, but we do have two women for the first time who will be vying for this spot. Are we, the public, the viewers, the voters, revering them the same that we would men who are running for office?
Well, the research would say that actually how we interpret women in leadership positions or women in organizations is different, even when we think that we are progressive and open in terms of how we evaluate others. We tend to evaluate women by a different standard than we do men. And consequently, when women are being declarative, when they're being strong, forceful, at times we evaluate them more harshly. By the same token, if they express emotion, we tend to also evaluate them more harshly. Now, on the other side, when men are declarative, forceful in their opinions, that's considered the way that they're supposed to be. And then when they are emotionally expressive, sometimes we also give them high fives because now they've disclosed that other side. And so I would say that we need to be mindful of the way in which we view our two candidates for the Senate, the two primary, the major party candidates, and make sure that we keep our own gender biases in check, because again, even those who think that they are open-minded sometimes do tend to evaluate women in a different lens and be more critical when we should be paying attention to their words.
We're judging things like their clothing, their hair, their makeup. How do we get past that?
Well, hopefully by more and more women running for office. I think that the more that women do that, the evidence suggests that women are just as likely to win offices if they run, but women typically have not put themselves in the ring. And so here, an unusual race in which whichever candidate, major party candidate, wins, well, we will have a female, and that in itself will break norms and hopefully get people to understand that we should be evaluating, again, those words, those statements, those policies, not what they wear, and not the fact that they are, in fact, female.
Okay, Dr. Kensky, thank you.
Thank you.
Politicians and pundits have all sounded off about higher turnout this election. Many are watching to see if that includes greater participation from younger voters, 18 to 24 years old. In past midterm elections, turnout among millennials in that range trailed Gen Xers and baby boomers. Now a new generation is coming of age to cast ballots. That includes Will Fodder, Nadlin Masters, and John Dalton. Our discussion covered why they're motivated to vote and how they're encouraging their peers to do the same. How are we doing here at the University of Arizona when it comes to engaging the younger voter?
Yeah, I think we're doing really well. I think student government really made it a point this year to kind of get students engaged. We have early voting that started mid-October and is going to the November 2nd. So really trying to have avenues for students to get involved and to be politically active.
I think that voter engagement should not necessarily be a partisan issue. I think that the lack of enfranchisement and lack of voting amongst millennials is such a problem that we need to approach it in a bipartisan manner in order to effectively empower young people.
Nadlin, you really have your ear to the ground on this campus. Do you hear from students who say, issues, as Will mentioned, the really emotional ones, I don't want to associate with a party, I just want to focus on the issue? Yeah, I think definitely. I think students are, especially nowadays, are really not wanting to be put into boxes, and so they're really wanting to be active and learn more about these policies and stand up against specific issues instead of actually like a party. What are some of the issues that are most important to college Republicans?
Well, in regards to President Trump specifically, just getting the truth out about his policies and where he stands, but also, like we were just talking about, issues. A lot of what you see going on is people trying to be involved more or less in movements as opposed to the parties. So like with Trump, Make America Great Again. And you could say the same thing when President Obama ran. It was hope and change. And with a lot of these, you come with, you get a lot of support and obviously a lot of opposition, and people become more engaged. And sometimes, people pay more attention to the issues, which brings them to the party, whether it be Democrat or Republican.
You just mentioned President Trump, and Will, we had Bernie Sanders on campus.
We are going to make public colleges and universities tuition free.
Does that do enough to draw out the young voter who's still wondering, should I be involved in this one?
Full disclosure, I am not a Bernie fan.
Okay.
Okay, just to preface what I'm about to say. He does really speak to the young people and motivate them in a way that I think is good. I mean, I think any way to get young people out there is good.
There's often a perception that you guys don't vote because you're too busy with school, there's too much going on. And sometimes some of the older folks like myself will say, well, We also have work, we have kids, we have mortgages, we have things, we make time. Why doesn't the younger voter make time? John, you want to start?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, school, of course, like we were just saying, but a lot of younger people normally aren't really necessarily politically engaged, or they find it too hard to just, fill out all the applications, to, whether it be changing their residency to Arizona and that process. For local people, sometimes they're here at the university, they come from Phoenix, and they don't know if they should change their voter registration to here. Will it really matter? Does it count? And it does. It does count. It does matter.
They don't want to take that extra time to do it because they kind of get lost in these websites of how to actually register to vote. But I think that they're inclined to, like I said earlier, about issues. And so I think our generation has political issues right at the forefront because they're always on our phone. It's social media driven. And so I think students are wanting to get involved. They're just trying to find which avenues to do that.
Well, it sounds like commitment is an issue because we come here for 4 years and we think, I don't know if this is going to last or how long I'm going to be around. Any things that you could actually say to students that would make them say, all right, I do want to do this because I know it's important?
I think that since the Clinton years, we've actually just become so polarized and so bitter and vituperative against one another that my generation has always grown up having politics be broken, essentially. It's always cascading the other side and trying to portray them as this horrible enemy. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to focus on public policy, and that'll appeal to students, focus on issues rather than party.
You've brought up polarization before, and I think each one of you has as well, but you're the next generation. You're that population that can help change that. What do we need to understand about what's coming next and how we should have these civilized discussions to disagree with each other?
Yep. Well, a lot comes to kind of like what we're doing here, just kind of like an open forum in civil debate. And by having that, I think it makes the issues maybe even more connected to us. Mm-hmm. And the younger generation are more focused on seeing where we agree than disagree. Mm-hmm. And we also see these swings in the political spectrum all the time where you have a swing towards more a divided nation as opposed to people having civil conversation, kind of like you see with like John McCain. Mm-hmm. At one point he was very popular within the Republican Party, and then he swung, the party swung in a different direction, more of a separated and divided party and even nation, and you see more resistance to people like him or a Jeff Flake. I think we'll see very soon a swing back towards more civil politics.
Will, are both sides guilty of doing that?
I think a lot of it has to do with constant access to the media, because it's easy to get attention when you can just call someone an idiot versus actually sitting down and having a discussion with them. And then I think it's okay to vehemently disagree with someone if you can just respect their motivations for believing what they believe. So I think we need to return back to civility and compassion rather than just this Manichean idea of like two opposing sides just duking it out.
Nadlin, you're a politician on campus. Yeah. How do you manage these sorts of discussions? Because they can get nasty and they can be very respectful, but where's that balance?
Yeah, and I think student government plays an important role in that. So we, as student government, as our entity, are nonpartisan, and so we kind of help foster the debates. We've had students from Young Dems and the College Republicans come talk to us about events they want to host, and we are all about just promoting having access to students to get that information, and so kind of being that happy medium to have those conversations on campus.
Is this that race that will actually generate that younger voter turnout from now on?
Just the social media part of it, there's a lot of conversations about politics now, and there's no way for our generation to escape it because it's on every app that you pull up.
It's in our face more than ever, probably, right, John?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think that we will have the most voter turnout from the youth vote that you've seen maybe in the past. I think this will be kind of the start to it.
Do you three hope that one of these days you won't get that flack for being the younger voter? That at some point you'll just be the voter who's engaged and educated about the issues?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's something that I think we're all going towards, instead of getting rid of that stereotype that young voters always have, is that we're here, we have opinions, we care about the politics that are going to be affecting us, and we're going to vote.
We'll always be called the younger voters, yeah. But there'll be ups and downs, but I think ultimately they'll be more engaged to the fact as how to get our votes as opposed to how to get us to vote.
I feel like politicians need to appeal to millennials in a way that speaks to them and the issues that they're cared about, which again is less fealty to the party structure and more issue-oriented. So I feel like once they figure out a way to target that, that'll really help with voter engagement efforts. But then I also yearn to shed the stereotype of the young voter as well.
True. Okay, my thanks to all of you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Mexico is considered one of the deadliest countries for journalists. They face threats from drug cartels and corrupt government officials. Recently, the University of Arizona School of Journalism honored one of Mexico's best-known journalists for her efforts to hold those involved in corruption accountable. Nancy Montoya has more.
Buenos días a México, buenos días a quienes están siguiendo esta señal a través de internet en la Aristegui Noticias.
She's one of the best-known faces in Mexico. She spent more than 25 years on Mexico radio and national television. And she's very visible on CNN in Español, which airs throughout Latin America.
Esto pese a que la CNDH había alertado.
Now, if you're a corrupt elected Mexican official or involved in illegal activities, Carmen Aristegui is the last person you want mentioning your name on any of her programs. She understands and has accepted the possible consequences for her actions.
Mexico is living with very serious problems of violence and drug trafficking by organized crime.
By all accounts, Mexico is the worst country for journalists in the Western Hemisphere.
Celeste Gonzalez de Bustamante is with the U of A Center for Border and Global Journalism. She says the fact that Carmen Aristegui refuses to back down in the type of journalism she chooses to do is more than just admirable, it is also dangerous.
Think about this. A journalist a month is killed in Mexico, and that has been the case for the last 3 years. So even
Gonzalez de Bustamante nominated Aristegui for the U of A's Zenger Award. The award celebrates freedom of the press and the First Amendment. I sat down to talk to Aristegui about journalism in Mexico. I asked how she handles her personal fears when she or her family is threatened.
Fear is an intrinsic way that we as humans develop protection mechanisms to be on alert, to do things differently, so danger does not cost you.
Aristegui says those living in the United States might be surprised to learn that right now the Mexican people are anxious to see how the new Mexican president, Andrés López Obrador, who takes office in December, will handle Donald Trump. On that, she has her own personal opinion. I want to talk a little bit about the relationship of Donald Trump and the new president. Are they going to get along?
Es un enigma.
It is an enigma at this moment that they are on a honeymoon. At this moment, they have exchanged very civilized messages, very courteous.
Muy corteses.
However, let's see what happens when they begin to make decisions. Let's see what kind of position López Obrador has on the topic of the wall, for example. With a president like Donald Trump, who speaks of Mexico as he does, who has said that Mexico is an enemy of the United States, Trump has said many things about Mexico that are very offensive. And then there's the idea that he's going to build a physical wall to solve the immigration issue, which is stupidity. And even more stupid is that Mexicans will pay for it. It's a stupid thing. We're not going to do that. But that generates a situation of high tension between the two countries.
And so, on radio, TV, print, and online, Carmen Aristegui says she will continue to be, as she calls it, the thorn in the side of those who seek to abuse the Mexican people or their way of life, whether they live in Mexico or the U.S.
Porque vean lo que pasa.
Improving infrastructure is an issue that comes up at all levels of government. In Pima County, a bond measure worth nearly $500 million would go toward road repairs. About 2,200 miles of roads in the county need fixing. It sees Proposition 463 as a solution. Pima County would split $430 million with cities and towns based on population size. Voting yes approves the bond and cancels out a planned decrease in property taxes. Voting no results in lower property taxes, and money for repairs would come from existing funds. As for which roads are prioritized, we got insight from Ana Olivares, director of the Pima County Department of Transportation.
The needs are great, and it's not just the pavement
that needs to be maintained and kept up. You know, it's the grading of the dirt roads, especially after storms. We have pavement markings that need to be kept up, signs that need to be kept, vegetation that needs to be cleared off from the edges. So there's a lot of needs. But the biggest need, as you've read and heard throughout everywhere, and it's all over the country, if you read about the aging infrastructure that we have, is the condition of the pavement of our roads. That is, you know, we have about 65–70% that are in poor or failed condition that need continuous upkeep with pothole patching. Now, pothole patching is a temporary patch. It's not a permanent fix. So we patch, it rains, you patch, it rains, it's continuous.
Is this pretty typical for Arizona and then regions of this size?
It is pretty typical. You're familiar with the 1997 bond program and the 2006 RTA program in the region that was based for capacity improvements. There was a lot of growth happening, so all of the funding capabilities and scenarios were pushed towards capacity. And now we've done that great. Look at the Northwest Side, Cortero, McGee, La Cañada, La Cholla, widened to 4 lanes. Then other states, they did the same thing. As growth just happened, capacity was what we needed. But now that that's kind of caught up, we kind of neglected to take care of the maintenance part, so now that is a big need.
How are you financing that when you don't always have the money or the election that's coming around the corner?
Yeah, so that's been the question of the last few years. So I'm not sure. So the way the Transportation Department is funded in unincorporated Pima County, it's with gas money, HERF money, it's called Highway User Revenue Funds, and also the VLT, the Vehicle License Tax that we get. That is a majority of the funding. So we looked at our history of service requests and what were the majority of our needs. Pothole patching was number 1. That was the highest request we got. And then grading of dirt roads, and then vegetation trimming. So as you're driving along, if the vegetation comes, you get those. So we reorganize our maintenance crews to ensure that we are attacking those tasks first. We really rely on the community to help us, guide us in what we are focusing on. So we encourage the public to keep an open communication with us.
Okay, so it's not one of those things where you discourage involvement, like you count on drivers and voters to call you.
We do, and we get plenty that do, but we're always encouraged. Just even when we do a big widening project, we have a very open house, very open way of communication. The public is also our eyes and ears on the road.
Sure.
So,
okay, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Very welcome.
That's all for now. Thanks for joining us. To get a look at next week's program, visit us on social media and let us know what you think. We'll see you next week.